Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at SCGMA in Worcester, Massachusetts. My name is Ruben Bressler and I am joined by Joel Larsson.
Hello there.
Second place at Pro Tour, Gate Crash, several other Grand Prix on your list, including a Team GP. And you're in America for a summer tour, basically, where it started in Houston, Vegas, Miami, and now you're on the SCG circuit trying to qualify for the Invitational.
Gotta do it, gotta try.
And today you're battling with Grixis Control, a deck that's sort of a little bit off the radar. Why did you decide to play Grixis today?
So first of all, I didn't have that many cards, and I asked on Facebook actually, does anybody have a deck or like cards for a deck maybe? And Gerard directly
Gerard
contacted
Fabiano, who's commentating today.
He has contacted me about, okay, I have a surprise for you. I'm like, okay, I'll hope for the best then. But so he gave me this Grixis list, and I know he has worked a long time in Grixis.
Yeah, Gerard's written several articles on this deck, various types of this deck, and to me, I'm a little surprised at how little Grixis is seeing play. I think that people get stars in their eyes when they see Sphinx's Revelation and think they have to stick to that.
Which is actually the format isn't all about Sphinx Revelation also. Like the Control Mirrors, Big Bane, this good guy, and
Right, so the main attractions to the deck, as you just pointed out, to me are the win conditions and the removal package. We'll start with the win conditions. You have the 1 of Aetherling and 2 Olivia Valderon. And the third secret win condition, of course, is Nephalia Drownyard. Doesn't typically win games, but the games in which those two other ones can't get the job done, a lot of decks can't. If they can deal with both of them somehow, they can't ever deal with Nephalia Drownyard.
No. Nephalia Drownyard is here, as you said, another win condition, but it's so hard to deal with all of these very, very different win conditions. Especially off the sideboard, we'll come to that later, I guess. And Olivia is obviously, like you've seen from John, super good against these fire decks, just Rex games,
and a lot of decks that can deal with an Olivia. Think that they can deal with an Olivia very efficiently. It's actually a lot more difficult to deal with an Olivia than most people think. Especially decks that are very popular, like Jungle Reanimator, only have about 2 real answers. And those are Fiend Hunter, Angel Serenity. Sometimes they're running Garruk Relentless, but
where I have a bunch of removals.
But you have a ton of removal for all those creatures and for those planeswalkers. So let's move to the removal. Speaking of which, the real reason to run Grixis to me is Far and Away.
Far and Away is really good.
It's a very powerful magic card that's not seeing enough play, and you also have access to Pillar of Flame. Which is for the quicker creatures, things like Voice of Resurgence especially, but also the 1-drops. Talk to me about the removal package that you have in here.
So we have Pillar of Flame, as you said. It's really good in all this Jungle Wolves and whatever is running out there, Voice of Resurgence, Strangleroot guys. Also, as you said, the early drops like Cackler, and Grave Crawlers and stuff like that. So some early defense, because the deck doesn't have the option to run a Wrath effect, which means there has to be a lot of removals in the deck. And cards like Olivia, like we talked about earlier. So Pillar is definitely necessary. And then we have Far and Away, which is kind of our way to get ahead of the match. It's a 2-for-1, obviously. Or it's not obviously a 2-for-1, but it seems like a 2-for-1 because of the tempo you gain and you get kill a creature.
It can actually be 3 different cards. Sometimes it's just, if you need to bounce something, it's just a bounce spell. If you need to make them sacrifice a creature, it's just a sacrifice spell, but later in the game, obviously, when you can pay the kick cost, basically, it becomes an overwhelming tempo advantage and an overwhelming 2-for-1. Sometimes even more, depending on if they have hexproof creatures with auras on them.
Which is also a very good thing, like you pointed out, the hexproof creatures. This is so good to all against this banned hexproof decks. You just have 4 main deck answers against guys. That's so good.
Now, one of the main draws of Jund is Farseek. You don't have access to Farseek. You do, however, have Rakdos Kiru. Which does a halfway decent Farseek impression. And it's also actually very difficult for a lot of decks to deal with, surprisingly.
Against my last opponent, he played also Grixis list, but with a whole lot more Planeswalkers. And off the sideboard, both of us got to board out a lot of removals because they're dead in so many situations in the game. So when I have this out, he has a really hard time dealing with it, which means it will just destroy his Planeswalkers. I had one game where I did this 15 damage, and I just won because of it.
Now, the one Planeswalker you're running is Jace, Architect of Thought, in the main deck. Jace has sort of picked up a lot of popularity post Pro Tour Dragons Maze.
Yes.
Why is Jace so good right now?
Jace is like, first of all, like this deck doesn't have Sphinx Revelation, as you pointed out, which means you need to have a couple of other like card draws since you want to like hit your end drops or whatever. But also against all these token decks that are running around, all these aristocrats, Lingering Souls, and Jungles, and Doom Travelers, and all these small creatures, just negates all of them.
Yep.
And then when you untap with it, you just draw, have the option of 3 different cards, and you can just overwhelm your opponent with the card advantage.
Absolutely. With a deck like Junk Aristocrats, there isn't a creature in the deck other than Obsidian, which only some lists are running. There's no creature in the deck with greater than 2 power, naturally. And so being able to Cumberstone all of your opponent's creatures, making them all 0-1s or 1-2s, very powerful effect. Speaking of Planeswalkers, we've got more in the sideboard. And so let's talk about the sideboard. We've got a lot of 1-ofs, a lot of 2-ofs in the sideboard to go over. And we're not going to go over all of them. I want to point out a couple, though. We have Nicol Bolas Planeswalker.
Yeah, it's the big daddy.
Yeah, exactly. Which we haven't seen a ton of play recently, but very popular card. And you're running one in the sideboard. Is that mostly for control mirrors?
It is for
like very slow ones, like Esper.
Yeah, like Esper, the White Red, also, but Junk as well, and Jund, because they can run this very attrition war, and this just goes over the top. This goes over the top of Angel Serenity. It goes over the top of other planeswalkers like Tamio, Jace, Liliana, whatever. It's just such a, it's just a game ender if they can't deal with it directly. And you always like kill a planeswalker or kill a Nifalid Drown Yard, take over a Frag Tusk, and it's always game
absolutely breaking. You have your own Sire of Insanity in your sideboard, which I find kind of interesting considering a lot of the time you're playing at instant speed.
Sure.
You've got Syncopate, you've got Think Twice, you've got Ultimate Price and other instant speed removal, but you've got a Sire in your sideboard.
Sire is very good against the Signature Legend decks. Obviously, that's why John has run this as well. Because off the sideboard, we can sit there with our count spell. We maybe played a few discard spells like Jace here and there, and then I can go with my main deck Cavern.
Right, we have one main deck Cavern of Souls, depending on what threat we want to be able to resolve.
Either Edeling, which wins the game, like we talked about, or Sire of Insanity, which means if I play this on turn 6, because I'm worse at pass and go game, they just ruin if they can't deal with it directly.
Now we have a couple other interesting ones in the sideboard that I think people are sort of used to seeing. We see Curse of Deathhold used against various aristocrat strategies. We've seen Evil Twin used against Angel of Serenity decks. Aetherize, though, not so much a card we've seen before. Talk to me about why we're running Aetherize.
So Aetherize is a weird one-off, but it's good against the banned hexproof decks because they attack you and you can just bounce all the guys, get rid of all the auras, and just gain back this tempo.
Sure.
And if you bounce all the creatures, all of your sacrifice effects get so much better as well.
Right.
Like your far and away can actually kill their guys when they play it because they can't like put multiple threats out there, and also it does some job against like the red-green matchup and the aggressive decks.
Yeah, in response to a Gore Clan Rampager or something
like
that.
Aetherize, good old limited trick.
Yep, exactly. So you're 3-0 already.
Yep.
Played against 3 different archetypes. We saw you on camera in round 1, and we're going to be rooting for you because you've only got 3 opens to try and qualify for the invitation.
Yeah,
right?
this and 3 more, right?
This and 3 more.
Yeah.
And it's you, Michael Bond.
That's right.
Who we just had on camera. Thomas Enevoldsen and Christopher Larsson.
That's right.
And the 4 of you are trying to grind out these last ones to try and get to the invitational and try and get there.
We got to play some SCG while we're in the States.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Got to. Well, we're excited to have you here. I'm excited you're doing well with such an interesting deck, and I'm sure Gerard is as well.
Yeah.
Joe Larsson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll be back here at SCG Worcester.